I recently watched the video series on the castles of Ireland. It was fascinating to go by video to all those various castles and to hear the history that took place there. Those castles that were built as places of refuge and defense for the land that the people were trying to keep and defend against. Most of those castles today are in ruins, but there are some that have been kind of restored, and they're tourist attractions. And it's truly a fascinating history for that time in Ireland. Well, in Psalm 91, verses 1 and 2, we read, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." First of all, it says that He is a shelter for us to dwell under His shadow. Now, the shadow of God does not change. That's the important thing to know here. Shadows that we experience here on earth do change, don't they? I mean, we can go out in the backyard and on a hot summer day, and we can sit under the shade of a tree and maybe read a book or something, and pretty soon we realize we're getting kind of hot, and that shade has changed, that shadow has moved on because of the sun. Well, God does not change. His shadow isn't going anywhere. James 1:17 says He's unchangeable. His shadow does not change. And we're supposed to stay in the shadow of the Almighty. The Almighty, the Amplified Bible says, whose power no enemy can withstand. There's no enemy that can defeat you when you are in the shadow of the Almighty, because He is Almighty. And then the second verse says, "I will say to the Lord." This is a proclamation we make to the Lord. "My refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I will trust." What a declaration. My refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I will trust. You see, the problem is that we leave the refuge. We walk out of the shadow. We're our own worst enemy that way, aren't we? You know, in those castles in England and all, they had a moat that went around them, and then there was a gate, a big old gate that would come. Now, you've seen pictures of them, and then a bridge, you know, that would go across the moat. Well, we raise that gate and lower the bridge, and we walk out of that fortress. And when we do, we get into trouble. What we need to do is stay there and talk to the Lord about our struggle. That altercation we had with a friend or a relative that just bugs us. We don't need to walk out of God's fortress and begin to wrestle with it in our own mind. We need to talk to the Lord about it. We need to ask Him to help us to get through that physical problem that we're facing that can really destroy us in our mind and in our hearts. And it may be a very serious condition. But what we need to do is we need to stay in the fortress and talk to God about it and allow Him to love us, like a child getting up on his lap and a father's lap, and having the father put his arms of love around the child and just loving on him. That's what we need to do, because that's what He wants to do. He wants us to stay in and abide in His presence. I think that's what the Apostle Paul meant when he said, "Pray without ceasing." It's an attitude that we live in all the time, that as we face the struggles of life, we begin to get worried about things, as we're so prone to do, and we begin to fret. We need to just return to that fortress, to that shadow of the Almighty, whose power no enemy can withstand, and we need to talk to Him about it. We need to allow His presence and His power to sustain us and to encourage us and strengthen us, because He will. That's why it says He is a shelter for us. He's there for us every moment of the day. So be encouraged today. Will you stay in the fortress? Don't go out. Stay there. When the negative thoughts and those things that would defeat you begin to come in, just talk to the Lord about it and cry out and call out to Him and ask Him for His help. And the promise is that He will be there. He will help you. He will strengthen you. He will give you everything you need. Just stay in His presence today. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.